Welcome to Up All Night DIY. I'm Monica. Thanks for joining me. Today is the Great Spring Fake Bake Challenge, hosted by my friends, the amazing Dawn of Shabby Meets Bling, and the fabulous Jackie of Crafting in Mimi's World. Please be sure to check out Dawn and Jackie's channels, as well as all of the awesome creators in the playlist. You'll find links in the description box. We have 3 fab faux breads for you, so let's get into it. My first project are fakey flaky croissants and some butter. So for both the croissant and for the butter, I'm going to be using Model Magic, as well as a variety of acrylic paints. Now I have here some tinted clay from a previous project. I used Ceramcoat maple sugar tan to originally tint it. So what I'm going to be doing is mixing that clay with some fresh clay to get a good base for our pastry. All I'm going to do is knead some of the tinted clay into the fresh clay until it's completely incorporated. And this is going to give us a really light shade of tan. And just to make the process easier, I'm breaking up the tinted clay into smaller pieces and incorporating it into a smaller piece of fresh clay. And then we're going to mix it all together in one big batch. It takes a couple minutes, but well worth it. I'm going to grab a handful of our freshly tinted clay and roll it into a ball to start. I guess you could say it's about the size of a small dinner roll. I'll start rolling one end of the clay into a rounded point, and then I'm going to move over to the other side and do the same. And then, leaving the clay thicker in the middle, I'm going to use both hands to refine those rounded ends while rolling. See what I mean? Easy, right? I'm just going to slightly curl those ends down, creating the crescent shape. See, it's very quick. So now we all know that croissants are generally a big rectangle that's rolled into a crescent shape, thicker in the middle, taper on the ends. So all I'm going to do is use my fingers to create little grooves on either side of the middle of the clay. This creates the thicker bump that the croissant would have in the center. And I'll also add grooves closer to the end with my fingers, just the same way, to mimic the pastry shape. So there we go. We have that big bump in the middle and then 2 on either side of it. To reinforce that shape a wee bit, I'm going to use the handle of a clay tool, giving it a wee bit more definition. To create that flaky look that a croissant has, I'm going to make fine lines across the top of the clay with my palette knife. You can always use a butter knife if you don't have a palette knife. I'm sure that would work too. And today I'm going to make 3 of each of the pastries that I'm creating, so that I have a nice display when I'm done. You can make these lines as wide or as fine as you like. I'm going pretty fine here, close together, but it's totally up to you. We can set that aside to dry, and let's work on our butter pads. So I'm going to grab a small bit of the fresh clay and add a wee drop or 2 of this cheapy acrylic paint. I think it's Michael's in-house brand in the color yellow. And now we're just going to work it into the clay until it's completely incorporated and our clay is the color of butter, hopefully. We're not quite there yet, so let's add a drop more paint. This time I'm adding Ceramcoat Crocus. It's a bit brighter yellow than the last color. And we'll work it in the exact same way. Yeah, we're still not there yet. Looks a wee bit like a marshmallow peep. So I'm going to use a couple of drops of Americana Sunset Gold to round it off. And hopefully this will do it. So just to make sure, I held it up to my curry gold, and it's pretty close in color, so we're going to go with this. And all we're going to do is roll out the clay to the thickness of a butter pat. And then all I'm going to do is cut it into squares with my clay blade. I'll lightly soften the edges with my fingers, make them a wee bit more rounded, since generally that's what better pats look like. You know what I'm saying? You feel me? Right, so once they're done, we're going to let them sit overnight as well. These look good, and we are ready to paint. Painting these is going to be a snap. All we're going to do is dry brush multiple colors on to the croissant to mimic what a real croissant would look like. So I'm going to start out with Ceramcoat Maple Sugar Tan, and this is actually the color that I mixed in with the clay to tint it. And as I said, we're going to dry brush over the surface. So once I loaded my brush, I'm going to offload most of the paint onto a paper towel and just slightly brush that color onto my pastry. I'm going to do multiple passes with the maple sugar tan to deepen the color before I move on to the next shade. I feel like this is a really good base color for this pastry. Generally speaking, croissants usually have somewhat of an orange tinge to them, so my next color is going to be Art Pueblo, which is a deeper orangey color. It's almost like clay. I just want a hint of orange, so I'm going to go light. But again, it's personal preference. You know, you might want a little bit more orange than me. You do you. My next color is Americana Honey Brown. This is going to tone down the orange just a tad, you know, before we move on to our final color. But this will add a nice golden baked look to it. And my final color is Americana Raw Sienna to add some richness to it. All of the shades that I used are very warm in their tone, so I think that's really appropriate for a croissant. To preserve our pastry, I'm going to apply a coat of DecoArt multi-purpose sealer in a satin finish. This will protect the clay, and it's going to add a glazy finish similar to a croissant. You could always go with a much more glossy finish if you like. And I also apply some of the sealer to the butter pats. There we go. They look good enough to eat. DIY 2, Savory Breadsticks. We're going to need to tint some more clay, so once again I'm going to use the Ceramcoat Maple Sugar to create our breadstick dough. I'm going to deepen the color here with a little bit of Americana salted caramel, and we're just going to work it into the dough, just like we did before. We will take a handful of that clay and roll it out into a long cane. Once I get it to the length that I want, I'm going to cut it into 2 equal lengths. Mine are around 8 inches long. I thought that was a good length to be substantial, but without being too floppy. You know what I mean? I wasn't super fussy about the length. It was more, you know, that I wanted all 3 of my breadsticks to be generally the same size. I place my pieces side by side, and then grabbing both ends, I'm going to twist the clay together to create a spiral. Really just like making, you know, a candy cane. Same thing. So twist, twist, twist. I gently roll the clay so that the pieces stick together the whole way down. I don't want any loose bits. You know what I'm saying? I think that's a pretty good size. So now what we're going to do is cut off the ends to make them uniform and, you know, tidy. And we're going to make 2 more just the same. And then we can set them aside to dry overnight. Once again, my first application of dry brushing will be with the maple sugar tan. So I'm going to start here at the top, and then to make sure that I get all of it, I am going to work my way down the breadstick, twisting it as I go, just to make sure that I get the entire surface of the breadstick covered, you know, before moving on to the next color. So next, I'm going to add a touch of Ceramcoat brown iron oxide, just a teeny tiny smidge, ever so lightly. And our final color will be a dash of raw sienna for the golden brown baked look. I went pretty light with this too, because I could see how quickly this would wind up looking like a pretzel, and I really wanted it to look like a breadstick. So I'm going to apply a coat of the sealer to the entire stick, and then I'm going to come back in to add a wee bit more in the grooves and along the front of the breadstick, and I'm going to shake on some real parsley flakes. This adds a nice organic realistic element and a nice pop of green. Once I get the parsley on there, I'm going to give this a coat of clear matte sailor spray just to keep the parsley from shedding. And that's it for our savory breadsticks. I really like how these turned out. Might have to make a couple more. My third and final project are going to be scones with raisins. This time I'm going to be using some foam clay. I got this from my sweet friend Tanya over at Ribbon Branch Crafts. Tanya has her own YouTube channel where she makes adorable foam clay projects. I'm going to link that below in the description box for you. She also sells the foam clay, so there will also be a link to her store so that you can grab yourself some supplies and support a woman-owned small business, should you be so inclined. Foam clay is easy to work with, and it's very forgiving, so it's great for the use in fake bakes. I'm going to grab a handful of the clay here, and as you can see, it's kind of got like a taffy, stretchy quality to it, but it's not sticky at all. I'm just going to wad it up into a ball here, and I want it to be nice and thick, so I'm going to press it down on the table here, and I'll roll it out a bit with my acrylic roller until I get the thickness that I'm looking for. Foam clay is really such a nice clay to work with, and it's non-toxic, so great for kids. I'm going to use my round fondant cutter to create the top and the bottom of our scone. So once I get this cut out, I'm going to have to go back, wad up some more clay, and, repeat the process. I'm not super worried if they're the same thickness. Doesn't really matter for our purposes, but I do want the top and bottom to be thicker than the middle. So we'll get that cut out. And to add some height and some layers to our scone, I'm going to roll out my clay again, this time thinner, and I'm going to cut 3 additional circles. These are going to be centered in between the top and bottom. Okay, so now I'm just going to stack the 3 thinner layers on top of my bottom layer, and then we'll place the top on, sandwich them in between, and I'll press down to make sure that everything is, really well stuck together and solid. To give this some authentic looking texture, I'm going to use my ball tool on the top to create some divots, some peaks and valleys. I'll also use the handle of my clay tool and go along the edges and just add texture anywhere where I think it will look realistic. You feel me? Right, looking at this, I want to add some more definition to the layers, so I'm going to take my X-Acto tool and just go in there and slice in some more definition. Give it more of a flaky look. And once I'm happy with that, we're going to set it aside to dry, and we are going to need some raisins, so let's go do that. I have here more clay from Tanya over at Ribbon Branch, and I have some brick red and some indigo. And what I'm going to do is take a pinch of each and mix them together to get a raisin color. The clay blends really well together, and we're just going to do it the same way that we did when we mixed paint in with our Model Magic. It's the same premise. Now I'm just going to roll out some little raisin shapes, and I'm going to use my clay tool to make the shrivels of the raisin. That's a pretty good size there. So I'm going to use my tool and just press in some shrivel marks. I'm sure a toothpick would work for this too. We just want to get that ridgy, bumpy bit so that it looks like a raisin or a date. So I made a bunch of them, but I'm probably only going to use a few. And, I can just keep the rest for another project. And once we're done with our raisins, we're going to let those, as well as our scones, dry overnight. So I'm going to start with the base coat of Americana buttermilk, and I'm going to apply it all over the scone. Along the sides here, I wasn't super fussy about coverage of some of the white peek through. That's fine. And now I'll get a good coat on the top and bottom of my scones. Now we can dry brush the top with maple sugar tan until we're happy with the color. This really does have a golden look to it. It's a really good faux baked color. And I think I'm going to go a wee bit darker on the edge of the bottom and the top. I think that looks more realistic. I think this looks pretty good as is, but I do want to add just a touch of the raw sienna to the top and the bottom of the scone. Just a very light dusting. So now I'm going to hit the sides with a little bit of the maple sugar tan too. Very, very lightly. I feel like I need to come back in here and separate those layers again. So once again, grabbing my X-Acto knife, and I'm going to dig it into the foam along the side and kind of lift up as I go to expose a little bit of the white foam. I want that to be visible. Again, I think that looks more realistic to a scone. Yeah, that's definitely more authentic. The scones, as well as our raisins, are also going to get a coat of the multi-purpose sealer. With my 3-in-1 glue, I'm going to add 3 wee raisins to the top of each of my scones. And that should just about do it for our fake bakes. Shall we take a final look at our faux goodies? With just a wee bit of model magic and a little bit of paint, we created realistic, tasty-looking croissants and butter pats. We used the same clay mixture to create our savory breadsticks, adding just a sprinkle of parsley for a realistic touch. And finally, our raisin-topped scones made from foam clay. I mean, those raisins look legit. Perfect for high tea. I hope you enjoyed today's projects as much as I enjoyed making them. I was inspired to make a selection of faux bread because growing up, one of my bonus moms, my friend Kim's mom, always had a basket of fake bread on her dining table. She would always say to us, "Don't eat those. They're for decoration. You want something to eat? There's plenty in the kitchen." I miss that lady. So drop me a comment, let me know what you think and what your favorite is. Please be sure to check out our host, Dawn and Jackie's channels, as well as the playlist for more fun fake bake ideas. Links will be in the description box. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and all that good stuff. Stay creative, my friends. Thanks for hanging with me. See you next time, up all night with Monica.